Welcome to Artifact of the Week. I'm Harold White, a museum specialist here at the National Scouting Museum, and it's likely that everyone hearing this knows the story of the unknown scout who assisted William D. Boyce, a Chicago newspaperman who was lost in the legendary London fog on his way to a meeting with Baden-Powell. Well, as the story goes, when Boyce tried to compensate the scout refused, saying he was just doing a good turn. Boyce was so moved by this gesture, he returned to the United States and used his influence to help organize the Boy Scouts of America. As the BSA began to take root, Boyce felt the needs of farm and country boys weren't being met by the Boy Scouts. James E. West, the first Chief Scout Executive, disagreed, believing that the 4-H program served the needs of these youth better than the BSA could. Eventually, Boyce parted ways with the BSA, and in 1915 he founded the Lone Scouts of America, a program based on the Lonecraft program of the British Scouting Association and Ernest Thompson Seton's Woodcraft Indians. Now initially, Boyce appointed all of his paper boys to be members of the Lone Scouts, and by the end of 1915 they reported more than 30,000 members. The Lone Scouts of America didn't require any adult leaders, and there were no age limits on membership. While Lone Scouts did the program on their own, those that lived close enough together could gather in a local tribe. Other Lone Scouts were able to form male tribes, communicating via the U.S. Postal Service. Each tribe elected a president, originally called a captain, a scribe, and a treasurer. Tribes could also gather as a wigwam. By October of 1916, the Lone Scouts of America reported 133,000 members, and those members wanted a uniform. So in 1917, a Lone Scout uniform was created. One of these uniforms is on display here at the National Scouting Museum, along with this picture of an unknown Lone Scout proudly wearing that uniform. Much like the Boy Scouts of America, the Lone Scouts also had an advancement program. Theirs was based on degrees. These degrees were also grouped in lodges. For example, the Teepee Lodge included the Lone Scout, Woodcraft, and Lone Eagle degrees. Next was the Totem Pole Lodge, made up of the Lone Bachelor, Lone Woodsman, and Lone Hunter degrees. Finally was the Sagamore Lodge and the Sagamore degree. Because of Boyce's background in the newspaper business, the Lone Scouts also held literary competitions where a member could be recognized as a Lone Scout contributor, Lone Scout scribe, Lone Scout graduate, or Lone Scout quill. There was also an award system for promoting and recruiting new members to the Lone Scout program. Members could be recognized as a Lone Scout organizer or a Lone Scout booster. For those few Lone Scouts that earned the Sagamore degree, the Lone Scout Quill, and the Lone Scout Booster Award, they were recognized as a Supreme Scout. Only 123 Supreme Scouts were ever recognized. Now before we continue on the Lone Scouts, let's take a quick step back to 1915 and the start of the Lone Scout program. As I already mentioned, William Boyce left the BSA to launch the Lone Scouts of America, and the BSA, while being very diligent about protecting the use of the term scout in the United States, never sued Boyce over the use of the term. They did, however, start their own program to directly compete with the Lone Scouts. This program, called Pioneer Scouts, never really took off. These actions did keep the door open, and James E. West continually pressured Boyce to merge the Lone Scouts into the BSA. By 1920, the end of the Lone Scouts of America came very much into sight. Membership numbers were grossly inflated, reporting more than 490,000 Lone Scouts in the country by 1922. The Lone Scouts up to this point in time had been bankrolled by Boyce's newspaper business, but they were losing money and his newspapers were beginning to struggle as well. In 1924, Boyce finally agreed to merge the Lone Scouts of America into the BSA. As the merger occurred, it is reported that somewhere between 45,000 and 65,000 Lone Scouts made the transition. Lone Scout membership peaked in 1926 at 108,000, and in 1930, when the Cub Scout program was formed, the Lone Cub Scout program also came into being. So now that you have a history lesson on the Lone Scouts of America, where does that leave us today? Well, rather than me just telling you, we've invited Mike Walton, a former Lone Scout and adult Lone Scout friend and counselor with the Direct Service Council. But before we let him tell his story, Mike, thanks for joining us. And can you tell us what the difference is between the Direct Service Council and a average local council that we would know?
The Direct Service Council serves scouts and scouters who do not live in the boundaries of the traditional Boy Scout councils. At that time, the Boy Scout councils included the Transatlantic Council, where I'm from, the Far East Council in Japan, serving the Far East, the Aloha Council in Hawaii, and many of the islands in Micronesia, and the Canal Zone Council, which serves scouts living in the Canal Zone of the United States.
How exactly did the BSA bring the Lone Scouts of America program into their existing structure back in 1924?
The intent was that while the Boy Scouts serve a lot of youth living in cities and counties, there's a lot more youth that are out in rural areas or out in urban areas that cannot join a Boy Scout troop. They cannot be a part of a Boy Scout patrol. So they became Lone Scouts, and they would receive their service directly from the national office in a similar way that the Direct Service Council came to be. And they would get all of their information, their services, their awards, the recognition through the national office and not through a local unit. A lot of those units, however, which became a benefit to the BSA, grew in numbers as kids would talk to other kids about what they're doing at home, and as kids would say, "Well, I'm a Lone Scout. What's that? Oh, that's something cool. Let's do that too." And so those units, those onesies, twosies, became patrols, which became troops. And a lot of communities owe their existence to that single scout that was a Lone Scout living in their town for years, and then convinced his friends to become scouts also. Lone Scouting today is used in about a third of the BSA's local councils today. There are a lot of reasons why that is so, but the biggest reason why is because the Boy Scouts of America, through their structure, they have an emphasis on units and membership, units and youth.
As a youth, I was part of the Far East Council in a traditional pack in Korea, and then I moved to Taiwan, joined another pack there, and then crossed over into Boy Scouts in a traditional troop in Far East Council. So how exactly did you end up in Luxembourg as a Lone Scout?
That's a great story. My dad was a driver for the folks at the American Embassy in Luxembourg, and he was stationed there. And during that deployment, he asked me to come along because I've never been to Luxembourg or to France, even though I grew up in Germany as a kid. So I took the opportunity and spent 2 semesters in school and lived in Luxembourg on the compound of the American Embassy there in Luxembourg City. And I became a Lone Scout because there were no other scouts there. And I wanted very much to continue my scouting experience. I was a tenderfoot scout when I left Germany, and then I came to Kentucky. I became almost a second-class scout, and I became a second-class scout while I was in Luxembourg. I had a friend and counselor who was not my dad. That was typically Lone Scout friends and counselors are the parents. Typically the father of the scout. My Lone Scout friend and counselor was a guy named William Billy Steen, and Mr. Steen was worked in the American Embassy as a translator in one of the offices there. And he is an Eagle Scout. He earned his God and Country Award, and those things impressed me a whole lot because when I came back to the States after that, I sought out to earn the God and Country Award and to become a first-class scout. You had to be a first-class scout to earn the God and Country or any religious symbol back then. as well as some other things too. But that put a really good positive impression on me. We completed the requirements for second class, all except for a board of review. And by that time, it was time for my dad to rotate back to the States and start work on some other things at Fort Knox, where we lived for a while. And that was the end of my lone scouting experience as a youth. During the first Gulf War, during Operation Desert Shield, Desert Storm, I was stationed in Kuwait, and I had the opportunity to work with a young man who lived in Kuwait, but came back to the States every 6 months. And while he was in Kuwait, I got the opportunity to serve as his Lone Scout friend and counselor, that was a unique experience also, because I didn't realize up until that time how much paperwork a typical scoutmaster and a typical troop committee chairman had to give, produce, and sign and acquire to just for one kid. Now imagine if you have to do that for several kids. And so that gave me a great appreciation of what troop committees and troop committee chairmen and especially scoutmasters went through.
So if a family believed that their child would benefit from the Lone Scout experience, what should their next step be?
The first step, before they do anything else, is to do the youth protection training. I can't stress that enough. Even in this time where we're questioning, whether or not the Boy Scouts of America as a national organization is going to survive or not, it is highly important that the people that are involved in the program basically take interest in the program. And the best way to take interest in the program is by participating in the basic training. The second thing they need to do is that they need to contact the local council office nearest them. And they need to make an appointment to talk to the Scout executive, not with the field director or the director of field services or a program director. They need to talk to the Scout executive, because the Boy Scouts of America back in the 1980s instituted a policy whereby only the council scout executive, him or herself, can approve Lone Scout applications. The thing after that, after they fill out the application and hand over some money, they need to establish a Lone Scout friend and counselor. This is the person that's going to be working with their son or daughter as they work through the requirements in Cub Scouting or in Scouts, BSA. That needs to be a person that the parents trust. And of course, that person also has to be protection trained also. That's it.
Well, Mike, we want to thank you for joining us and helping us to learn more about Lone Scouts in the BSA. And that's going to wrap up our look at Lone Scouts. Join us next week as we take a look at a long time ago program of the BSA, the Air Scouts. We look forward to seeing you then.